The European film market that happens at Berlinale every year, that's a must attend, in my opinion, for independent producers, trying to finance and develop projects.
Yeah, that's really cool. Can you run us through what it's like as an independent producer to attend one of these markets and sort of how you approach it, what your goal is, whether you're, selling something or just networking? What's it like?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to answer that question, I'll paint the picture a little bit. When the first market I ever went to was the European film market in February of 2023, so almost 2 years ago. I did that. I was very much trial by fire. I talked to a few producer colleagues, like, hey, what should I do to sort of prepare myself for this? And I made a few meetings ahead of time, but not to the scale that I should have. And I'll elaborate on that a bit. But I remember getting there, and at the European film market, they largely take over sort of three locations in Berlin, in the center of Berlin. They take over this big museum for 2 weeks. They take over the Marriott Hotel, and then they take over another hotel right next to I forget which one, but they take over two hotels in this big museum. So I went to this museum. I walk in, and it was just immediate like overload because every film commission, every sales company, every distributor is there, and they have booths of varying sizes. And there's independent production companies that are there that might have a table or a booth, or some of the bigger distributors have a whole wing. And I remember just like sort of walking through all the different rows, and like walking through the Canada pavilion, and things like that. Sorry, I'm just pausing for a second because my guard dog thinks she hears something. So
We have a friend. Yeah.
I was walking through the rows of this and walking through the Canada Pavilion, and I generally think I'm like, I remember thinking in that moment, it's like I thought like, I'm a good BC producer, like people know who I am, they know our company, like we're well known. And then walking through those wings, I was like, wow, I am nobody.
Right.
Like there,
Yeah.
there are
You're a
so
speck
many.
of dust in
There
the.
are, yeah, a speck of dust is exactly how I felt in that moment. It's just like, I am nobody. Nobody knows who I am. My God, like there's just so much, like it is very overwhelming. A market is very overwhelming if you haven't been before. So it was
Yeah.
very much a trial by fire. And I really just took that in stride. I was also there. I was participating in Telefilm's Producers Without Borders program, which I traveled with a small cohort from Canada. So that helped a little bit. I was with a directing colleague as well, Asia Youngman. We were traveling together on that.
I love
So
Asia. Yeah, she's great.
she had been before, so she sort of held my hand a little bit through the experience, and but that was a good way to sort of dip my toes in. I made a few meetings, not as many as I should have, but it was a good way to sort of get introduced to that. But from there going on, throughout the rest of that year, I attended Hot Docs, I attended TIFF, I attended the American film market in LA. So I knew I had to have a better strategy. I knew I had to make meetings 4 to 6 weeks out, because that's when people start to fill their calendars. So I started to put those requests in 6 weeks ahead of time. And so I could fill my days, essentially, because you want to be as productive as you can while you're there, and make use of the time. But and I think, to your point, Ken, have clear and specific goals. If you're pitching a project, okay, you're pitching a project, but be prepared to pitch, know who you're pitching to, do the due diligence on those sales agents or those companies, whoever you're pitching to, know your film, know who you are, and know what you're doing. Or if it's just networking, again, having a clear plan of like, who do I want to network with? Like, do I want to, meet other producers? Do I want to talk to sales agents? Do I want to, participate in the co-production activities? It's like really having a clear, defined series of goals is how you're most efficient at those markets, I find. But going back to what I said about EFM being vital, that's what I've been told from producers and consultants over the years, is like, if you want to get a film financed, Berlin is the market to go to. And then as the year sort of goes on, Cannes is the market to follow up on. And then as we get closer to the end of the year, American film market is typically in November. Hopefully you've sold or closing a deal by that point. But yeah, market travel is a big part of what I do, and takes a big chunk of time. And an example of that is, this past year I was in Berlin in February. I met with a sales agent based in Spain. We connected on a project. We want to work together, started structuring a deal. Here we are, May 17th. We're just getting around to paperwork now, you know?
Yeah.
So things like that take a lot of time. But it's important to get that face time, get in front of those people, start the conversation, and then you can, continue that process throughout.
You keep pointing at EFM as being a really important one to go to. Is that just because of where it lands in the calendar year? Or is it because EFM has a very special, this is the place to go if you want to be an indie filmmaker, and all the other ones are kind of like you go there second, you go there third, you go there fourth? Is there like a strategy of which markets to attend and when?
Again, what I've been told from colleagues and consultants, and sort of what I've figured, I guess, for myself, is I think what you're saying is because Berlin lands sort of in February, right at the beginning of the calendar year, that's a key one to sort of kick things off at, and start getting traction on projects. Something I've heard over the years about Berlin is it's a good development market. So it's a good place to introduce projects, projects that you're in the process of packaging. You might have a key piece of talent or something like that attached, or a director you're talking to. But then as you go forward through the year, as you're approaching Cannes, then that's a great market to sort of follow up on. I've personally never attended Cannes because it is cost prohibitive for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, again, I've never attended, so maybe it's not my place to say, but I think it's just such a busy, oversubscribed marketplace that I'd almost rather I tend to focus my effort on Berlin at the beginning of the year, and then just doing my own individual like follow-ups throughout the year. AFM is one I've attended in the past. It's not a great market for producers. I've found it's really more of a sales environment, like sales execs and buyers. That's really their.
Completed films trying to find sales agents and distributors, correct?
Yeah, and I think part of that is the position at in the year. Like it's nearing the end of the year. Like, buyers, want to fill their slots. Sales agents want to, sell
Yeah.
their catalogs. But I think also, just for lack of a better word, the intensity of the market there, I would find, is it's less filmmaker friendly, more buyer friendly. Whereas I would say the reverse of something like EFM, because it's directly tied to Berlinale, one of the biggest, most prestigious film festivals in the world. It's definitely more of a filmmaker friendly environment.
What about TIFF? It seems to be the one that everybody in Canada goes to. But as an indie producer, what are you getting out of it going there?
I think as an independent producer, it's like, so, well, I'll just preface it by saying, is like, I tend to like to make 2 trips to Toronto a year, Hot Docs and TIFF, because one is sort of positioned in the spring, one's positioned in the fall. And it works out for us because we develop and produce both documentary and narrative. Like, obviously not every production company is going to need to make a trip to Hot Docs, but that's how it works for us. But I think TIFF is the ultimate like Canadian networking environment. I think any serious producer is at TIFF almost every year, or every couple years, or makes an appearance, when they can. And I don't want that statement to alienate anybody.
But come on, like if you're a producer in Canada and you're not going to TIFF, go to TIFF. Yes.
Yeah, you need to go to TIFF. It is sort of an unofficial market environment right now. Like, a lot of business gets done there. They are starting an official market in 2026, I believe. I think that's excellent because it's already sort of an unofficial place. Like, a lot of buying and selling happens there, obviously. But I think just having that additional market position in the calendar will be hugely beneficial. And I think ultimately they're doing it obviously to raise attendance and things like that. And I think that'll draw in more
Right.
buyers, draw in more producers. It'll be interesting to see what effect that has on AFM, to be honest, because they're going to be
Right.
so close together now. And I know this probably isn't the podcast to get into the nitty gritty of this, but AFM has had some trouble these last couple years. Like, they've had a couple disastrous additions.
Oh, we can get into anything. We can get into this is so interesting.
Like they moved it to Vegas.
They moved to Vegas, and now it's coming back to LA. It's back to Century City, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how this year plays out. I am planning on attending AFM at the end of this year, so I'll see if I can get that firsthand opinion. But I mean, starting next year, you're going to have the TIFF market in September, and then AFM in November, and it's the same buyers are going to be traveling to both. So it'll be interesting to see what that means sort of for the market.
Well, and Toronto has the largest, like, commercially, I guess, successful film festival in the world, basically now, right?
And I've talked to a couple of our distribution partners about this. Like, what are your opinions on, how that's going to work. And, sort of what I've heard is like, well, we already see, like we see most of the sales agents or the people we want to see, the buyers at TIFF. So what's the point of going to LA 2 months later? So if that's already sort of the position, it'll be interesting to see when that official market launches, what that means. But, for me as a producer, I think it's just great that there's going to be that official market launched, but at the same time, it is sort of business as usual in that sense.